The day before my son's wedding, the waitress grabbed my arm. "Hide and watch!" I ducked behind the bar. Moments later, my future daughter-in-law and her mother walked in and started coldly discussing their plot. Their faces turned deathly pale when I stepped out and calmly said, "Just 3 words." Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Stanley Wright. I'm 64 years old and I've lived in Phoenix, Arizona for most of my life. I own 4 restaurants, Wright's Family Dining, built them from nothing over 30 years. People think the restaurant business is about food. It's not. It's about reading people, understanding what they want, what they need, and most importantly, what they're hiding. I should have seen it sooner with Heather. My son Jeffrey is 32. Good kid, smart, hardworking. He's been my regional manager for 3 years now, and honestly, he's got a talent for the business. After my wife passed away 8 years ago, Jeffrey and I became close. Not just father and son, partners in building something together. 6 months ago, he met Heather Cole at some PR industry event. She was stunning, I'll give her that. Bright, articulate, the kind of woman who lights up a room. She worked as a PR manager for a marketing firm downtown. Jeffrey was smitten from day one. At first, I was happy for him. He deserved someone. But around month 3, things started to shift. Heather began inserting herself into business conversations. "Jeffrey mentioned you're still using the old menu layout," she'd say over dinner. "Have you considered modernizing? I know some great designers." Or, "The social media presence is so dated, Stanley. Let me help you with that." Always helpful, always improving, always critical of how I'd run things for 30 years. Then 2 weeks before the wedding, we had a family dinner. Just the 3 of us at my house. Heather was talking about the wedding plans, the venue, the guest list. Then, as if it had just occurred to her, she said, "You know what would make things so much simpler? If the business was in Jeffrey's name. For tax purposes. It would streamline everything." Jeffrey just nodded along. "Makes sense, doesn't it, Dad?" I kept my face neutral, but my stomach clenched. "I'll think about it." Heather smiled, that perfect practice smile. At the restaurant, I started watching her differently. The way she talked to Rosa, our head waitress who'd been with me for 12 years. Heather's voice would go cold when she thought I wasn't listening. "That's not how you do it in professional establishments," I heard her say once. Rosa looked hurt, but said nothing. The week before the wedding, I arrived at the flagship restaurant for a final walkthrough of the venue setup. The ceremony was supposed to be in 8 days, a small affair at a resort in Scottsdale, but the reception would be at my restaurant. Rosa saw me come in and immediately looked nervous. She kept glancing at me, then at the door, then back at me. Something was wrong. When I walked toward the bar, she grabbed my arm. "Mr. Wright," Rosa whispered urgently, "please, you need to hide behind the bar. Right now, you need to see this yourself." Her face was dead serious. Rosa had worked for me for 12 years. She'd never been dramatic, never caused problems. If she said I needed to see something, I believed her. "Behind the bar?" I asked. "Please, trust me, they'll be here any second." I didn't argue. I ducked behind the high bar counter, crouching in the corner near the wine refrigerator. It felt ridiculous, a 64-year-old man hiding in his own restaurant, like some kind of spy. But Rosa had that look in her eyes. 90 seconds later, I heard the front door open. 2 women's voices. I recognized them immediately. Heather and another woman I'd only met once, her mother, Denise. Rosa busied herself wiping down tables, staying out of sight. The women sat at a table in the far corner. Not close enough to see me, but close enough that I could hear every word if I stayed quiet. "So the old fool still hasn't signed anything over?" Denise's voice was sharp, businesslike. "Not yet," Heather replied. "But he will. Jeffrey's been softening him up. Another week and we'll have the wedding done. After that, Marcus said we move fast." "Marcus? Who was Marcus?" "What about the son?" Denise asked. "Is he completely on board?" Heather laughed. It wasn't the warm musical laugh she used around Jeffrey. This one was cold. "Jeffrey's been easy. 6 months of the right attention, and he'd sign over his own kidney if I asked. The father's the only obstacle." The lawyer said we need to move within 3 months of the marriage, Denise continued. Get Jeffrey to sign the restructuring documents before Stanley realizes what's happening. Once the business transfers to Jeffrey's name, Arizona's community property laws do the rest. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, managed to open the voice recorder app, and hit record. Marcus already drafted everything, Heather said. Power of attorney documents disguised as tax optimization forms. Jeffrey won't even read them. He trusts me completely. Once those are signed, we control the restaurants, the properties, everything. And if the father suspects, he won't. He's so desperate for Jeffrey to be happy, so afraid of being alone. Classic elderly single-parent syndrome. He'll convince himself I'm good for his son right up until we've stripped every asset. They talked for 8 minutes. 8 minutes of cold, calculated discussion about how they'd manipulate Jeffrey, forge documents, use Marcus, their lawyer, to structure the theft legally. They'd done this before. Denise mentioned the last one who'd fought back, but lost everything anyway. Jeffrey wasn't a person to them. He was a mark, a means to an end. After 8 minutes, they stood to leave. I waited until I heard the door close, then stayed crouched for another 30 seconds to be sure. When I finally stood up, Rosa was standing there with tears in her eyes. I heard them planning this yesterday, she said quietly. I didn't know what to do, but you needed to know. I looked at my phone. The recording was there. 8 minutes of pure, undeniable evidence. Thank you, Rosa, I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. You may have just saved everything. I walked slowly toward their table, my mind racing. The wedding was in 8 days. They were planning to destroy everything I'd built, and they were using my son to do it. I could confront them. I could call Jeffrey. I could call a lawyer. Or I could do this right. I approached the table just as Heather and Denise turned back toward the restaurant entrance. They froze when they saw me. Heather's face went through a fascinating transformation. Surprise, fear, then that brilliant smile sliding back into place. Stanley, what a surprise. We were just... Stop, I said quietly. Both women went silent. I looked at Heather, then at Denise. Took my time. Let them wonder how much I'd heard. Then I said 3 words. I walked slowly toward their table, my heart hammering, but my face calm. The recording on my phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my pocket. Heather saw me first. Her eyes widened for a split second before her PR training kicked in. She plastered on that brilliant smile I'd seen her use countless times. Stanley, what a surprise! Her voice was warm, practiced, perfect. Denise froze. Unlike her daughter, she wasn't as skilled at hiding her reactions. I watched the color drain from her face as she calculated how much I'd heard. I stopped at their table, didn't sit, just looked at them both, taking my time. Heather was still trying to maintain the charade, her smile wavering now. Denise had gone completely still, like a predator deciding whether to fight or flee. Wedding's off, I said. 3 words. That's all it took. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the soft jazz playing through the restaurant speakers, the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Heather's smile finally cracked. What? She tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. Forced. Stanley, what are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, held it up so they could both see it. 8 minutes. Everything you said. All recorded. I let that sink in for a moment. Want to listen? Denise's face turned to stone. She was smarter than her daughter, I'd give her that. She knew exactly what this meant. Heather went even paler, if that was possible. You have 24 hours, I continued, my voice steady and cold. Get out of my son's life. Disappear. Because if you don't, this recording goes to every single client you have, Denise. Every employer Heather's ever worked for. Every business contact. Everyone. I turned and walked away without waiting for a response. Behind me, I heard nothing. Not a word, not a sound. Just stunned silence. My hands were shaking by the time I got to my car, but I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. I wasn't their victim anymore. I was their problem. At home, I made copies of the recording, sent one to my lawyer with a brief explanation, uploaded another to a secure cloud service, downloaded it to my computer. I wasn't taking any chances. If something happened to my phone, I had backups. Then I sat at my kitchen table and really listened to the recording again, this time taking notes. They'd mentioned a lawyer who specializes in these cases. What cases? Hostile takeovers? Manipulating family members? They'd talked about 3 months until everything would be ours. What was the timeline? What were they planning? The more I thought about it, the more questions I had. How long had they been planning this? Was Jeffrey really just a target from the beginning, or did it evolve? What documents had they already prepared? What legal traps were waiting for us? I needed answers. But more than that, I needed to protect what I'd built. The 4 restaurants weren't just businesses to me. They were 30 years of work, of sacrifice, of building something from nothing. They represented every early morning, every late night, every risk I'd taken. My legacy for Jeffrey. And these 2 sharks thought they could just take it? Around 9 that evening, my phone rang. Jeffrey. I stared at it for a moment before answering. Dad, what did you do? His voice was shaking with rage. I'd never heard him sound like that before. Jeffrey showed up at my door at 9 o'clock that evening. I barely had time to register his car in the driveway before he was pounding on the door. When I opened it, I barely recognized my son. His face was red, his eyes wild. You threatened my fiancée? Her mother? Have you lost your mind? Come in, Jeffrey, I said quietly. Let me explain. Explain? Explain? He pushed past me into the living room. Heather's in tears! She told me everything. You stalked them to the restaurant, eavesdropped on a private conversation, twisted everything they said, and then threatened to ruin their lives. So that was the story they'd given him. I shouldn't have been surprised. They were professionals, after all. That's not what happened, I said. Jeffrey, I have a recording of a conversation you had no right to record. He was pacing now, his hands clenched into fists. They were discussing business ideas. Heather wants to help expand the restaurants. She has connections in PR and marketing. They were planning to surprise you. The lies were so smooth, so perfectly crafted. I could see how he'd believe them. Heather had spent 6 months grooming him for this moment, building his trust, isolating him from anyone who might question her. I pulled out my phone, found the recording, and played the first 30 seconds. Denise's voice came through clearly. The old fool doesn't suspect a thing. Once they're married, we move fast. Jeffrey's face twisted. That's out of context. You edited it. It's 8 minutes long, Jeffrey. Unedited. Time-stamped. I'll send you the whole thing right now if you want. No. He backed away from me like I was holding a weapon. I don't need to hear your paranoid delusions. Heather told me you'd try this. She said you've never accepted her, that you're afraid of being alone, that you can't stand the thought of me building my own family. Each word was like a knife, not because they were true, but because I could hear Heather's voice in every syllable. These weren't Jeffrey's thoughts. They were hers, planted carefully over months of manipulation. She's using you, I said quietly. They both are. This isn't about love, son. It's about money. You're wrong. His voice cracked. You're just wrong. Heather loves me, and I love her. The wedding is still happening, with or without you. He left. I stood in my doorway and watched his taillights disappear down the street, feeling like I'd just lost my son. But I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. The next morning, I called David Kelly, the lawyer I'd worked with for years on restaurant contracts. We weren't friends exactly, but we had a solid professional relationship. Stanley, he greeted me when I arrived at his downtown office. Your email was concerning. Let's talk. I laid everything out for him. The conversation I'd overheard, the recording, Jeffrey's reaction. David listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with every detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Okay, first thing you need to understand. Arizona is a community property state. If Jeffrey marries this woman, anything acquired during the marriage is split 50-50 in a divorce. That includes business interests. But the restaurants are already established, I said. They're mine. Sure, but if Jeffrey is on any of the corporate documents, if he has any ownership stake, it gets complicated fast. And if they pressure him to restructure ownership after the marriage, he shook his head, they could potentially get their hands on significant portions of your business. My stomach churned. What can I do? Protect your assets. Change the ownership structure. Move everything into a trust where you're the sole beneficiary and controller. Keep Jeffrey on as an employee, but remove any ownership claims. He paused. But Stanley, we need more information. What exactly are they planning? Who's their lawyer? What documents have they already prepared? I don't know, I admitted. Then we need to find out. David pulled out his phone. I know a good private investigator. Patrick Anderson, former Phoenix PD detective, now does corporate and personal investigation work. He's thorough and discreet. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Patrick Anderson in a coffee shop in Scottsdale. He was in his mid-50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to catch every detail. I played him the recording, showed him everything I had. He took notes, asked precise questions about Heather and Denise, where they lived, where they worked, their habits. I'll need a retainer, he said. $3,000 to start. I'll dig into their backgrounds, find out who their lawyer is, see if there are any other victims or similar patterns. I wrote the check without hesitation. As I drove home that afternoon, I felt something shifting inside me. For months I'd been reacting, defensive, trying to make peace, trying to understand why I felt so uncomfortable around Heather, always second-guessing my instincts. Not anymore. They'd made me their target. They thought I was just a lonely old man with money, easy to manipulate through my son. They'd underestimated me, and that was their first mistake. Patrick called me 2 days later. I've got what you need. Can you come to my office? I arrived within the hour. His office was modest, tucked into a strip mall in Scottsdale, but the man himself radiated competence. He spread several file folders across his desk, like a dealer laying out cards. Denise Cole, he began, tapping the first folder. Married 3 times, divorced 3 times. Each divorce settlement was substantial. First husband, $78,000. Second, $142,000. Third, $215,000. My stomach tightened. That's over $400,000. $435,000 to be exact. Patrick pulled out 2 legal documents. 2 of those ex-husbands filed appeals claiming fraud. Both cases were dismissed due to lack of evidence, but the pattern is clear. She's been doing this for at least 15 years. And Heather? That's where it gets interesting. He opened another folder. Her birth name was Ashley Cole. She legally changed it 6 years ago. I'm still digging into why, but people don't usually change their names without a good reason. I thought about that. What was she running from? Or hiding? Patrick wasn't finished. I found their lawyer, Marcus Hill. He specializes in what he calls aggressive divorce strategy. Translation, he helps people maximize what they can extract from marriages. He's been disciplined twice by the Arizona Bar Association for ethical violations, but nothing that cost him his license. So they're a team, I said quietly. More than that. Patrick pulled out printouts of what looked like email exchanges. Hill worked on both of Denise's last 2 divorces. And look at this. He pointed to a name in the CC line. That's Heather's email, or rather Ashley's email at the time. She was involved in her mother's schemes before she even changed her name. The picture was becoming clearer and uglier. They've done this before. At least twice that I can document. Probably more. Patrick leaned back. Stanley, your son was targeted. This wasn't love. It was never love. They researched him, profiled him, made him a mark. I sat there for a moment, processing. Jeffrey wasn't just unlucky in love. He'd been hunted. There's one more thing, Patrick said. He pulled out a thin folder. I found Marcus Hill's rate sheet. His standard retainer is $25,000. Heather paid him $35,000 4 months ago, a month before she even met Jeffrey. The timeline clicked into place. They planned this from the start, from day one. I left Patrick's office with copies of everything. The drive home felt surreal. I kept thinking about Jeffrey's face when he defended Heather, called me paranoid. He had no idea he was just another transaction to them. That evening, Jeffrey called. His voice was different, not angry anymore, but hollow. The wedding's still happening, he said. Next week. I'm moving it to a smaller venue. Just close friends? Jeffrey, I don't want to talk about it, Dad. I just wanted you to know. You don't have to come. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone, feeling the weight of failure. The evidence was overwhelming, but Jeffrey couldn't see it. Heather had her hooks in too deep. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning I met with David at his office again. This time I brought Linda Green, a notary I'd worked with on various restaurant contracts over the years. Professional, efficient, no nonsense. We're going to restructure everything, I told David. Today. He'd already prepared the documents. Living trust paperwork, transfer of ownership forms, new corporate bylaws. It took 4 hours to go through everything, signing, initialing, notarizing. When we finished, the Wright restaurant chain belonged to the Stanley Wright Living Trust. Jeffrey remained as regional manager with a solid salary, but he had no ownership stake. Nothing for Heather to claim. Nothing for them to manipulate. This protects you, David said as Linda notarized the final page. Even if he marries her, even if they try to pressure him into signing anything, he can't give away what he doesn't own. It felt like building a fortress wall. But was it enough? That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Patrick. Found something important. Come to my office tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. You need to see this. I barely slept that night. What else could there be? Patrick's office was quiet when I arrived the next morning. He had that look, the one investigators get when they've uncovered something significant. Sit down, he said. He opened his laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a series of documents. Corporate restructuring papers, transfer of ownership forms, tax optimization agreements. These are dated from last month, Patrick said. Marcus Hill prepared them for Jeffrey's signature. I leaned closer, reading. The language was dense, full of legal jargon, but the intent was clear. Once signed, these documents would transfer controlling interest of Wright's family, dining to Jeffrey, and, by extension, after marriage, to Heather. They had this ready before the wedding, I said slowly, a full month before. And look at this. He clicked to another document, an email exchange between Denise and a property appraiser. My home address was in the subject line. They had your house appraised 2 weeks ago. Without your knowledge or permission, the appraised value was listed, $847,000. They weren't just after the restaurants, I realized. They wanted everything. Patrick nodded grimly. Your business, your home, your savings. They were planning to strip you clean. Jeffrey was just the key to the vault. I sat back, feeling cold. The calculation, the precision. They'd planned every detail for at least 4 months, maybe longer. How do I show Jeffrey? I asked. He won't listen to me. He thinks I'm paranoid. Show him evidence he can't deny, Patrick said. Show him his own signature. He pulled out another document, a tax form from 3 months ago. Jeffrey's signature was at the bottom. This is legitimate, Patrick explained. But look at this. He placed another document beside it, a signature card from Marcus Hill's office, supposedly Jeffrey's authorization to prepare the restructuring documents. Compare the signatures. They were different, slightly but noticeably. The second one was forged. They practiced, I said quietly. They were going to forge his signature if he hesitated. Or they already had him sign something innocuous and planned to claim it was authorization for everything else. Patrick gathered all the documents into a folder. Take this to him. Show him everything. The whole pattern. Make him understand. I called Jeffrey that afternoon. Meet me at the restaurant, I said. Please, just give me an hour. Dad, I don't. 1 hour. After that, if you still want to marry her, I won't say another word. Long pause. Fine. Tonight at 7. The flagship restaurant was closed on Sundays, so we had privacy. Jeffrey arrived exactly at 7, his face guarded. He'd lost weight, dark circles under his eyes. Heather was destroying him even before the marriage. Thank you for coming, I said. He sat across from me in a booth. You have 1 hour. I opened the folder, started with Denise's history. 3 marriages, 3 divorces. The pattern of escalating settlements. Jeffrey's face remained skeptical. Then I showed him Marcus Hill's background, the disciplinary actions, his specialty in aggressive divorce strategy. Dad, people get divorced. Just listen. I played the 8-minute recording, all of it. Denise's voice, the old fool doesn't suspect a thing. Heather laughing about 3 months, their discussion of manipulating him against me. Jeffrey's face went pale, but he shook his head. That could be about anything. Business plans. I laid out the corporate restructuring documents. These are dated from last month, before you proposed. They were planning to have you sign these after the wedding. Look what they do. They transfer controlling ownership to you, which means to Heather in a community property state. His hands trembled as he picked up the papers, reading. And this, I said quietly, showing him the signature comparison. They either forged your signature or planned to use something you signed innocently as authorization for all of this. Jeffrey stared at the documents. His face had gone from pale to gray. He kept flipping pages, reading, his mouth moving slightly, as if trying to convince himself this wasn't real. The house appraisal, I continued, showing him that document. They evaluated my home without permission. They were planning to take everything, Jeffrey. The business I spent 30 years building. My home. Everything. And you were just the tool they needed. He put the papers down with shaking hands, looked at me. His eyes were wet. From the beginning? His voice cracked. It was all... From the beginning? Patrick found the payment to Marcus Hill. $35,000. 4 months ago. A month before you met Heather. Something broke in his face. The careful control, the denial, all of it crumbled. He put his head in his hands. I'm such an idiot, he whispered. You're not. They're professionals. This is what they do. She said she loved me. He looked up, and I'd never seen him look so lost. She said I was different. Special. You are special, I said. You're special enough that they spent 4 months planning how to rob you blind. He sat there for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then he pulled out his phone. What are you doing? I asked. Texting her. His jaw was set now, that stubborn right determination I'd seen in his grandfather. The wedding's off, permanently. He typed quickly, his thumbs jabbing at the screen, sent the message. Then he looked at me with eyes that had aged years in one evening. I need time, he said quietly. I can't be here right now. I can't be around anyone. Jeffrey, I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I called you paranoid. I'm sorry for all of it. He stood up. I just need time. He walked out. I sat in that empty restaurant, surrounded by evidence of their calculated cruelty, and felt a strange mixture of relief and rage. My phone buzzed an hour later. A text from Jeffrey. Wedding canceled. I'm sorry. Need time. I texted back, take all the time you need. I love you. But I knew the fight wasn't over. Women like Heather and Denise didn't surrender quietly. They'd come back swinging, and I needed to be ready. The day after Jeffrey canceled the wedding, the day it was supposed to happen, I half expected some kind of dramatic confrontation. But there was nothing. Radio silence from Heather and Denise. That silence lasted exactly 24 hours. The next day I received an email from a law firm I'd never heard of. Subject line, Notice of Legal Action. They were suing me. Heather Cole versus Stanley Wright. $500,000 for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with prospective economic advantage. The complaint painted me as a controlling, paranoid father who destroyed his son's relationship through false accusations and illegal recording. I forwarded it to David immediately. This is garbage, he said when I called him. The recording was legal. Arizona is a one-party consent state, and you were present for the conversation. The defamation claim has no merit, because truth is an absolute defense. But what? But it's a PR move. They're trying to make you look like the villain, make you desperate enough to settle. And lawsuits are expensive, even when you win. How expensive? Legal fees could run $50,000 to $75,000 if this goes to trial, maybe more. I felt a cold anger settling in my chest. They'd lost Jeffrey, so now they were trying to bleed me financially while destroying my reputation. Fight it, I said, every step of the way. You sure? We could try to settle? No settlement? I want this on record. Everything they did, everything they planned. I want it documented in court. David was quiet for a moment. Okay, but be prepared. This is going to get ugly. He was right. Within 2 days, Heather had launched a social media campaign. Videos of her crying, talking about how Stanley Wright destroyed my life because he couldn't let his son grow up. Posts about emotional trauma, wedding expenses, career damage. She was good, I'll give her that. The comments were full of sympathy. Some of my restaurant customers started looking at me differently. A few regulars stopped coming. I overheard whispers. Did you hear about Stanley? I always thought he was so nice, but you never know. Jeffrey took it the hardest. He moved out of my house, rented a small apartment across town. When I called to check on him, his voice was hollow. People are asking me about it, he said. Friends, colleagues, they've seen Heather's posts. They think I'm the victim of a controlling father. What did you tell them? Nothing, I can't talk about it. I feel like such a fool, Dad. I brought this into our lives. This is my fault. It's not. It is. I should have seen it. You saw it. Rosa saw it. Everyone saw it except me. He hung up before I could respond. The lawsuit moved slowly through the system. Discovery requests, depositions, endless paperwork. David was right about the costs. My legal bills were already past $30,000. But Patrick was still working. And that's when things started to shift. He called me one evening in late August. Marcus Hill has problems. What kind of problems? The Arizona State Bar has an active disciplinary proceeding against him. Separate case, nothing to do with us. Client complained that Hill overbilled and mishandled settlement funds. It's under investigation. Can we use that? Maybe. But here's what's better. I found communications between Hill and Heather that predate their official attorney-client relationship. They were planning strategy together before she even hired him. That's a potential conspiracy. Keep digging, I said. Already on it. But Stanley, there's something else. Heather and Denise are getting desperate. I've been monitoring their movements. They know the lawsuit is weak. They're looking for leverage. What kind of leverage? Against Jeffrey. They're trying to find something to pressure him with. Maybe convince him to testify on their behalf. You should warn him. I tried. Jeffrey didn't answer my calls for 2 days. When he finally picked up, he sounded exhausted. She's been texting me, he admitted, dozens of messages, saying she still loves me, that you manipulated me, that if we just talk, she can explain everything. Don't respond. Don't engage. I know. I blocked her number. A long pause. But Dad, what if I'm wrong? What if there's some explanation I'm not seeing? Jeffrey, look at the evidence. Really look at it. I have. I know what it says, but my brain keeps trying to find ways it could be different, ways she could still be, not what the evidence shows. That's the insidious thing about manipulation. Even when you know intellectually that you've been played, emotionally you still want to believe the lie was true. Stay strong, I said. This will be over soon. But I wasn't sure I believed it myself. The court date was set, September 15th. 3 weeks away. 3 weeks for them to think they were winning. I was in my office at the flagship restaurant when my phone buzzed with a text from David. Court date confirmed, September 15th. Get ready. I looked out at the dining room, the restaurant I'd built from nothing, the legacy I'd almost lost to 2 professional predators. They thought they'd backed me into a corner. They thought the lawsuit would make me desperate, make me settle. They thought wrong. The first week of September felt like preparing for war. David brought in Gloria Perez, a family law attorney he described as the best fraud buster in Phoenix. She had a reputation for taking down scam artists, and her fees reflected it. $250 an hour, she said flatly when we met in David's conference room, plus court costs. But if we win, we countersue for everything plus attorney's fees. She was in her late 40s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She spread Patrick's investigation across the table, like a prosecutor preparing for trial. This is good, she said, tapping the documents. This is very good. But we need more. We need to show a pattern. 1 scheme is unfortunate. 2 is coincidence. 3 is a pattern. Patrick's working on it, I said. Then tell him to work faster. We have 2 weeks. Patrick delivered 3 days later. He walked into my restaurant after closing time carrying a thick folder. Found victim number 2, he said. Ralph Mitchell, Scottsdale businessman. Divorced 5 years ago from Denise's best friend, a woman named Sandra Hayes. Lost $340,000 in the settlement plus his business. And Denise was involved? Sandra testified in her deposition that Denise coached her through the divorce, taught her how to maximize the settlement. Ralph's lawyer suspected fraud but couldn't prove it. Will he talk to us? He'll testify if we need him. He's been waiting 5 years for someone to expose these people. That same week, Heather ramped up her pressure campaign, not against me, against Jeffrey. She started texting him, dozens of messages. I only knew because Jeffrey finally broke down and showed me his phone. She says she still loves me, he said, his voice hollow. We were sitting in his sparse apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes. She says you manipulated me, that the evidence was fake, that if I just talk to her, she can explain everything. What did you say? Nothing. I blocked her number. He set his phone down. But Dad, what if I'm wrong? What if there's an explanation? I looked at my son. He'd lost 15 pounds. He wasn't sleeping. And despite everything, part of him still wanted to believe the woman he'd loved wasn't a monster. That's when I knew I had to do something more. How would you like to meet someone? I asked. 2 days later, I arranged for Jeffrey to have coffee with Ralph Mitchell. I didn't tell him why, just asked him to meet with someone who'd been through something similar. They met at a Starbucks in Scottsdale. I wasn't there. This needed to be between them. But Jeffrey called me afterward. Dad! His voice was different, stronger. Ralph told me about Sandra, about Denise. The same playbook, the same lawyer, the same tactics. I know. He lost everything, his business, his savings, $340,000, because he believed someone who said she loved him. Jeffrey, I'm not going back to her, ever. Whatever happens in court, whatever she says, I'm done. I see it now. I really see it. When he said goodbye, I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard in months. Resolve. But I also knew Heather and Denise weren't done. They'd tried manipulation. They'd tried public relations. They'd tried legal pressure. Now they were desperate, and desperate people made mistakes. The mistake came from Marcus Hill. Patrick caught it. A breach of legal ethics so flagrant it was almost comical. In preparing discovery documents for Heather's lawsuit, Marcus had included privileged communications from his other clients, including details from cases he'd worked on with Denise before. He mixed his files, Patrick explained, showing me the documents. See these email headers? These are from the Sandra Hayes divorce. He accidentally included them in Heather's discovery response. Which means he's been working with Denise and her various targets for years. It establishes a pattern of conspiracy, and it proves he's ethically compromised. Mixing client files is a serious violation. Gloria nearly smiled when I showed her. This is the smoking gun. We can prove Marcus, Heather, and Denise have been running this scheme together. Multiple victims, coordinated fraud, conspiracy. What do we do with it? We prepare for war. And when we get to court, we don't just defend, we attack. The week before the court date, something shifted. I could feel it. Heather's social media posts became more desperate, more emotional. She was sensing something wrong. Jeffrey came to the restaurant one evening, first time in weeks. He looked better, cleaner, sharper, more like himself. How are you holding up? I asked. Better. He sat at the bar. I've been thinking. About everything. About the business. About what happens after the trial. What do you mean? I want to come back, not as your regional manager, as your partner. Really learn the business from the ground up. No shortcuts. No special treatment, because I'm your son. I want to earn it. I felt something loosen in my chest. You sure? I was blind, Dad. I let myself be manipulated because I was lazy. I wanted the easy path, the loving girlfriend, the fast promotion, the quick success. I didn't want to do the work. He met my eyes. That ends now. You were never lazy, Jeffrey. You were trusting. There's a difference. Maybe. But trust without wisdom's just naivety. He smiled slightly. Someone smart told me that once. Took me a while to understand what he meant. The night before the court date, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my office at home, surrounded by 30 years of restaurant receipts and business documents. Everything I'd built. Everything I'd almost lost. My phone buzzed. A text from Gloria. Rest up. Tomorrow we end this. I looked at the evidence spread across my desk. The recording, Patrick's investigation, Marcus's ethical violations, Ralph's testimony, the forged signatures, the house appraisal. Everything was ready. Tomorrow, Heather and Denise would walk into that courtroom thinking they were the hunters. They were about to learn they'd been the prey all along. The courtroom was exactly as intimidating as you'd expect. Maricopa County Superior Court, downtown Phoenix. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, the kind of place that makes you feel the weight of the law. I sat at the defendant's table with Gloria Perez on my right and David Kelly on my left. Across the aisle, Heather sat with Denise and their lawyer, Marcus Hill. Heather wore a conservative navy dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup, the picture of wounded innocence. Denise looked stern and professional in a gray suit. Marcus Hill was exactly what I'd expected. Slick, expensive suit, practiced confidence. He stood to make his opening statement, and I watched him paint me as a paranoid old man who destroyed a young woman's life out of spite and fear of abandonment. "My client, Ms. Cole, did nothing wrong," Marcus said, his voice smooth. "She fell in love with Mr. Wright's son. She planned a future with him. And then, without warning, without cause, Mr. Wright fabricated accusations based on a conversation he claims to have overheard. A conversation he illegally recorded, I might add, and used it to poison his son against an innocent woman. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was cold. This man had helped them plan to rob me blind, and now he stood there lying with absolute conviction. Then it was Gloria's turn. She stood slowly, deliberately, didn't rush to the podium, just looked at the judge, Judge Rogers, a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled into a tight bun. "Your Honor," Gloria began quietly, "this case isn't about a father interfering in his son's relationship. It's about a carefully planned conspiracy to defraud Mr. Wright of his life's work through manipulation, forgery, and exploitation of familial trust." She presented the evidence methodically. First, the 8-minute recording. The entire courtroom listened as Denise's voice filled the space. "The old fool doesn't suspect a thing." Heather's laughter, their casual discussion of timelines and strategies. I watched Heather's face throughout. She kept her expression controlled, but I saw the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers gripped the armrest of her chair. Then Gloria introduced the detective's report. 3 marriages for Denise, 3 profitable divorces. The pattern was undeniable. Marcus tried to object, irrelevant to this case, but Judge Rogers overruled him. "It establishes pattern and practice," she said. "Continue, Ms. Perez." Gloria showed the corporate restructuring documents Marcus had prepared a month before the wedding. Documents designed to transfer control of my business to Jeffrey, and by extension to Heather after the marriage. "These documents," Gloria said, holding them up, "were created before my client ever confronted Miss Cole. They prove this wasn't about love. It was about money. Always." Marcus stood to respond, his confidence finally cracking. "Those documents were—" "Let me finish," Gloria cut him off smoothly, "because there's more." She presented the forged signature analysis. Then came Ralph Mitchell's testimony, played via video deposition. Ralph described how he'd lost $340,000 and his business to one of Denise's previous schemes, described the exact same tactics, the exact same patterns, but Gloria saved the best for last. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce evidence showing that Ms. Cole and Mr. Hill have worked together before." She pulled out documents showing Marcus's involvement in 2 of Denise's previous divorces, with Heather, then Ashley, copied on key emails. "They're not just lawyer and client. They're partners in a pattern of fraud spanning at least 6 years. The courtroom went silent. I watched the color drain from Heather's face. Denise sat frozen, her stone mask finally cracking. Marcus Hill looked like he'd been punched in the gut. "Furthermore," Gloria continued, "we have correspondence between Mr. Hill and Miss Cole discussing strategy for this specific case, including ways to manipulate Jeffrey Wright into signing away his father's assets. This correspondence was obtained through legal discovery and demonstrates clear conspiracy." Judge Rogers leaned forward. "Mr. Hill, do you have a response?" Marcus tried. He really did. Stammered something about misunderstanding, about legitimate business practices, about taken out of context communications. But his voice had lost its conviction. He knew it was over. Judge Rogers looked at the evidence for a long moment. Then she looked at Heather and Denise. "I'm dismissing Ms. Cole's lawsuit with prejudice," she said. Her voice was cold, precise. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the State Bar for investigation into Mr. Hill's conduct, and I'm recommending that the County Attorney's Office review these materials for possible criminal charges related to fraud and conspiracy. Heather's face crumpled. Just for a moment, the mask fell completely, and I saw raw panic in her eyes. Denise grabbed her daughter's arm, but her own hand was shaking. Gloria stood again. Your Honor, Mr. Wright would like to file a countersuit for attempted fraud, emotional distress, and damages to his business reputation. We're seeking $750,000 in damages. The gavel came down. Suit filed and accepted. We'll schedule a hearing within 30 days. As we filed out of the courtroom, I saw Heather and Denise huddle with Marcus in the hallway. Their voices were low, urgent. Marcus looked sick. His career was imploding, and he knew it. 3 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Wright? Marcus Hill's voice was different now. Smaller. Defeated. I think we need to talk about settling this matter. The negotiations happened fast. Marcus knew he was drowning, and his only lifeline was cooperation. He met with Gloria privately and spilled everything, not just about Heather and Denise, but about 2 other similar schemes they'd run in the past 5 years, cases he'd helped orchestrate. The Arizona State Bar opened a formal investigation. Marcus gave them everything in exchange for a chance to keep his license with severe restrictions. He sold out his former clients without hesitation, proving that there really is no honor among thieves. 5 days after the court hearing, Gloria called me. They want to settle. Full surrender. They'll drop everything, pay your legal fees, sign NDAs, and agree to never contact Jeffrey again. How much are they offering? I asked. $85,000. It's everything they can scrape together without declaring bankruptcy. I thought about it. I could push for more. Drag this out, make them suffer. But Jeffrey had been through enough. Tell them I accept, but add one more condition. They leave Arizona within 30 days. The settlement was signed a week later. I sat across a conference table from Heather and Denise one last time. They looked hollowed out, defeated. Heather's perfect PR polish was gone. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale without makeup. Denise looked like she'd aged a decade. Neither of them looked at me as they signed the papers. Their signatures were shaky, hurried. They wanted this over as badly as I did. One more thing, I said as they stood to leave. They both froze. I looked at Heather. Jeffrey was a good man. He would have loved you for real if you'd given him the chance. But you saw a target instead of a person. I hope the next time you meet someone, you remember what it cost you to see people as walking wallets. Heather's face twisted. Shame, anger, regret, all mixed together. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it. What could she say? They walked out without a word. Patrick kept tabs on them afterward. They moved to Nevada 2 weeks later, probably looking for fresh targets. But Marcus's cooperation had flagged them in several states' fraud databases. Their game was over, or at least much harder to play. Jeffrey was the hardest part. He came back to work slowly, almost tentatively. The first week he barely spoke, just did his job, managing the restaurants with quiet efficiency. But I could see him watching me differently now, with respect, maybe, or understanding. One evening in mid-October, about a month after everything ended, he came to my house, stood on my doorstep like he wasn't sure he was welcome. "Can we talk?" he asked. We sat in my living room, and for the first time since this whole mess started, we really talked. Not about Heather or the lawsuit or the betrayal, just talked like father and son. "I was an idiot," Jeffrey said finally. "I ignored every red flag. You tried to warn me, and I attacked you for it." "You weren't an idiot. You were in love, or you thought you were." I poured us both coffee. "They're professionals, Jeffrey. They've been doing this for years. You weren't the first, and you probably won't be the last." "How did you know?" he asked. "From the beginning, you knew something was wrong." I thought about that. 30 years running restaurants teaches you to read people. You have to know when someone's genuine and when they're performing. Heather was always performing, always calculating. I could see it in how she treated the staff when she thought no one was watching. He nodded slowly. "I should have trusted you. You're trusting me now. That's what matters." A few days later, on a Friday evening, I held a small gathering at the flagship restaurant. Just family. Or what passes for family when it's just you and your son? Jeffrey was there, of course, and Rosa Medina, who I'd given a $10,000 bonus for her quick thinking that day behind the bar. "Mr. Wright, this is too much," Rosa protested when I handed her the check. "You saved us," I told her. "Both of us. You saw something wrong and you acted. That's worth more than money, but money's what I've got to give." She hugged me, tears in her eyes. "Thank you." The restaurant staff gathered around and Jeffrey made a small speech about loyalty and family and second chances. He was finding his voice again, becoming the man I always knew he could be. As the evening wound down, Jeffrey and I stood at the bar where this had all begun, the same bar where I'd crouched and listened to those two women plot to destroy us. "Dad," Jeffrey said quietly, "thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was horrible to you." "You're my son," I said. "I'll always protect you, even from yourself if I have to." He smiled, a real smile, the first I'd seen in months. I looked around the restaurant, my restaurant, the business I'd built over 3 decades, brick by brick, meal by meal, customer by customer. It was safe now, protected. And more than that, Jeffrey and I were solid again, stronger than before, tempered by fire. They'd wanted to make me a victim. 2 predators who saw an old man and his naive son as easy marks. They'd planned it meticulously, moved carefully, struck at what they thought was the perfect moment. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed that because I was older, I was weak. That because I ran restaurants instead of corporations, I was simple. That because I loved my son, I could be manipulated. They forgot that you don't build a successful business from nothing without learning how to deal with people who want to take what's yours. I'd spent 30 years handling difficult suppliers, aggressive competitors, dishonest employees, and demanding customers. I'd learned to read people, to plan ahead, to protect what mattered. Heather and Denise were just 2 more predators, smarter than most, more polished, better prepared. But I was always one step ahead. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.